This is Katrin with Disability Rights New York. Welcome to our podcast, Empire State of Rights, where we bring you information on the most relevant topics regarding disability rights and advocacy. Today, we welcome Mandie McGinnis, the EmpowHer Roc coordinator at Disability EmpowHer Network, and she's here to discuss the importance of community engagement, support, and mentorship to empower girls and women with disabilities. Mandie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Mandie, when we start our podcast, we do self-descriptions, and if you would, give us one for our audience, for yourself.
Okay. I am a white female with shoulder-length brown hair. Today, I am wearing a pink and black cheetah print headband, pink glasses, a light purple cardigan sweater, and a purple t-shirt with bold white lettering that reads educate, mentor, include, and celebrate disabled girls.
Thank you so much. And I am a white woman who is 50 with long brown wavy hair. I have light color eyes and a pink turtleneck sweater on today. And little earrings. I don't know if we can see them today. And I use the pronouns she and her. So Mandie, again, so good to finally get a chance to chat with you. Let's talk a little bit about you and the work that you do.
All right. As you introduced me, my name is Mandie McGinnis. Currently, I'm a student at Monroe Community College, and I also am the program coordinator for our 21 plus group of leaders at EmpowHer Roc Plus. That's the group I coordinate. I'm a mom of 4 disabled daughters and 1 disabled granddaughter, and also a disabled woman myself. I'm going on, I think, roughly almost 30 years of disability rights advocacy and activism. I was a young mother, and I quickly learned so much about disability way back in the mid-90s when I was pregnant for my first daughter. That was an eye-opening experience. And as I had more children, and all of my daughters have had a variance of different types of disabilities, it was through their experiences and being a mom and advocating for my daughters and kind of the gaps that we were experiencing that really pushed me into more of the direct action and lobbying and legislative changes. That went into full force when my eldest daughter passed away. She was denied to be placed on kidney transplant lists for, I quote, "she'll never be a productive citizen." So I didn't know how to handle that. And, you can't fight against a whole system when the whole system believes that disability doesn't equal life or rights to be productive. So after she passed, that's when I had the opportunity to get involved with Center for Disability Rights. And it was because of my daughter, Brianna, in one of the first pediatric consumers in the consumer-directed program. So I was linked with them. And then after her passing is when I really got involved with law and changes to that. My other daughters, they faced a lot of barriers in the education system. So again, through advocating for them and bringing a local school district to mediation for educational rights for my daughter, Brittany, I saw more gaps and areas in need for especially girls, young women with disabilities. And then for roughly almost a decade, I had to take a pause from the advocacy work to manage my own disabilities and understand, I guess, some of the barriers that I didn't realize were there for invisible disabilities, and really accept that identity of being disabled. And then also, all the intersectionality of being a woman with disabilities, and what does that mean? And that brought me to school, actually. I was pushed out of a career that I love in dialysis, really because physically I no longer could do it safely. But I didn't have the credentials to stay in nursing. And I thought, well, this is a great time to get further my education. I went back to college, and that's when Stephanie Woodward, the executive director of Disability EmpowHer Network, me and her, our paths crossed again. We first met when she was doing work with Center for Disability Rights. And when I took a pause, our relationship kind of didn't continue because I was no longer really able to do that at the time. So I was very excited when I seen she was a professor of mine. And I said, oh, this is going to be wonderful. So in class, our relationship, I loved everything about how she was teaching, about her organization, the organization, and an opportunity arose mid-semester that I needed to change a fieldwork placement. And I reached out to her and asked, would you take on an intern? And she was, I see what you do in class, and I know your history, and you align with what Disability EmpowHer Network aligns with. So this kind of magical thing happened, this space that I was able to create to kind of strengthen my identity as a disabled woman.
I'm so sorry. I did want to interrupt, and I also didn't want to interrupt, right? Like, because your story is it's so multifaceted. And as you're talking, I'm writing down some notes, and I'm thinking, I want to ask her about this, and I want to ask about this. And I feel like I don't want to cut off your last sentence. And also I wanted to ask a couple of questions because the way your story starts, and your trajectory of where we're going with this, which is to ultimately talking about Disability EmpowHer, and within the context of you getting there are so many other pieces of this that are not just noteworthy, but I would love to discuss with our audience. I think sometimes as we tell our stories over and over, there are parts where, depending on who we're talking to or and when, we're focusing on one thing. And then, and really there's parts of the beginning here that are so meaningful, especially talking about the barriers that you have not only identified, through so many different unfortunate, not just events, but being up against a system that was not assisting you or your family in the way that you needed, especially with your daughter. And when you talked about the denial for her, I was wondering if you feel in the last 4 years, as we've seen the shutdown, right? We saw what happened there in a very public way when it came to quality of life, when it came to ventilators or being able to get medical care. And in terms of a timeline, in terms of how many years have gone by, and then to see that this is very much still a barrier for many families. And how the healthcare, when we're faced with decisions about how to care for anyone, that there are these types of behaviors. And if you're okay discussing a little bit of that, did you find yourself during the beginning of the shutdown, or when we saw a lot of people being denied care or unable to even get into hospitals for fear of not getting care, what was your reaction to that? And because you experienced that yourself within your family, um, what were you thinking at that time? And can you give us some sense of how this is continuing to play out?
So, my daughter passed in July of 2006. So we're almost 18 years. And, you look back and there's still the same kind of barriers and stigma there. And you get to, the pandemic. And, I also have the perspective of having about a decade working in the nursing field. So in home care and then clinical settings. So I've seen what um, people with disabilities, and then especially people that not only are disabled, but they also are impoverished, right? So you have these things, and you go back a decade, and they're not receiving care, and now you have pandemic. And my knowing was, you think of the people that are in nursing homes, you think of people that are institutionalized, and you think of people with severe disabilities. Those people are not going to be protected. They're going to be the last ones to receive the care, the last ones to, if there's one ventilator left and somebody that has a severe disability, medical disability or whatnot, and is using that and has used that, there could be an option that in some room, there's people deciding or not, should they, there's somebody that's not disabled, somebody younger, somebody this, that society, the medical believe, are entitled or deserve this better. Because again, I think that, what is productive life? What does that mean? That, equals non-disabled people. What does, or disabled people, but not people with intellectual or developmental
Right.
disabilities. So all these layers.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. I mean, these are compounding issues, right? And
Right.
you talked a little bit about intersectionality in the beginning, and we saw uh, all of these things coming together at the beginning of the shutdown, through the height of the shutdown, and when we are talking about how changes need to be made. And you're someone who's been working to change laws, working to really bring not just awareness, but change to these areas. And where we see this is not only still happening in certain areas, it's happening all over. And when people with disabilities don't have a seat at the table, we know that we're not going to have the issues represented by people with lived experience. And something that our executive director says all the time, as well as people throughout the organization, the first to be impacted and the last to be considered. And it is so true, like as you were saying, like emergency preparedness and how people are affected in these ways. Um, and so talk to us a little bit about the the process of changing, of making changes in these areas, and how, of course, your journey has been from mother advocate in one to continuing to advocate and continuing to work in this field in such a meaningful way. Um, and how has this process changed, or have there been any major changes in your journey along this way?
I think in the probably the past 4 years, with, coming out of the pandemic and really highlighting the need for connection, the need for social and emotional support that you get within your social groups, right? And that's an area that a lot of people with disabilities don't necessarily have, that natural social group where you can grow and develop. And, you know, Disability EmpowHer Network was founded in 2020, in the pandemic, because, you know, we knew that there was this area that women and girls with disability didn't have the support, didn't have mentors, didn't have these social connections, weren't being considered leaders. And it kind of was a stance of, okay, we're taking our stance here and letting ourselves be known. Um, and that's how you get to your fullest potential. You put yourself out there and find those connections in the group. And the pandemic really highlighted, I think, the importance and what that can do to a person if they don't have that. And it's really benefited, I believe, our community.
Absolutely. And you took me right to where I was going with that. When I looked at when this was created and thinking about 2020 in its fullness and how really we saw so many of the issues that you started talking about, as well as how it is that this organization has really taken the lead on addressing them, especially for girls and women. And so talk a little bit about, of course, now let's get to it, right? Talk a little bit about Disability EmpowHer Network. And we've talked a little about why it was created. And let's talk about its mission and goals, because again, they are vast. And I love the way that they are showing up, and really they're tangible goals that you have some really great stories to share with us about. So tell us a little bit about that.
So, our main kind of objective and mission is uplifting and empowering girls and women with disabilities, to live to their full potential, help them to define success, what that means to them, right? And also, we want to transition into workforce. We start our ROC program is for girls about 8 years old, and then that transitions into our ROC Plus program for women over 21 plus. And it's to show, the older leaders mentor the younger, and it's just this evolving thing. Oh, I can get up to here, I want to work. I can get my social support, skill building opportunities. And, it's through kind of transformative ways because we actually go out there and they do it. They go and they learn how to advocate for themselves in ways that necessarily are kind of overlooked. If you can go up and order your food, or you can fundraise and ask people for money, then you can ask for support in these areas as well, because those are two kind of, you get comfortable in these areas. Okay, so let's ask over here. And then you have this support of your peers that are like, all right, come on, I'll go with you if you're nervous and I'll be there next to you. And you're there to do it. And then it's just this momentum that goes forward for them to say, I want more. Let's do more. So what does more mean? And then how can we do more? And, and then the impact is widened because it's their ideas, their expressions of what more means, more leadership skills, more opportunity to bring these changes, to put impact on the community and those around them. And then to invite their friends in that, and grow the network. All ages and all disabilities. So it's wonderful.
And I think it's amazing the 8-year-old ROC program. And I'm wondering how many statistics aren't necessarily what I'm looking for, but girls who go from the beginning program all the way through to ROC Plus, thinking at what an opportunity to start at 8 years old, and start to think about how you can really make a reality what it is that you want. And so talk to us a little bit about that. If there have been students that have gone from the very beginning who are still working through.
Okay, so the 8-year-old age has went from 10 to 8 because of the need and the want and the ask. So how can you say no, right? You just readjust and how to incorporate them. But we do have a leader, Mia. She started in our camp program the EmpowHer Camp program. And then she also is part of our Roc program. She just recently she's kind of in between because she's 18. And she's coming to the 21 plus group to grasp the mentoring and then bringing it back to then now teach programming for the younger leaders. And as she's kind of transitioned through all of this from the camp to the Roc to the now Roc Plus, she's also graduated high school. She attends Finger Lakes Community College and she's pursuing a college degree. And she's able to do these goals. And now she's taking, this is for real. Look, I've done these things and look at what I've been able to do. She's an incredible mentor. She's, a shining star. Her camp project has done wonderful things and made huge impacts here. And I'll get into that a little bit more when we get into talking about the camp program. But Mia is one that she wasn't that young, but she started in right in the beginning, our first camp program, and she has just blossomed and just keeps going forward and asking for more and completing her goals. And it's phenomenal for her now to say, I want to give back. And really that is what we do here.
That is so awesome. And let's get into it. Let's talk about the opportunities for the skill building, mentorship, guidance, the peer connections. I mean, again, I am blown away by all of the different programs that you are successfully putting together and have so many great stories about. So let's talk about all of those.
Okay, so we have a ton of programs. We have our local programs here in Rochester, our EmpowHer Roc and our EmpowHer Roc Plus program that we've been talking about a lot. And that there's similar programs is that it's monthly meetings, and it's really a movement, and it's led by and for girls and women with disabilities, right? We intentionally go out into the community. We have a chance for them to be themselves, really truly, unmask and be themselves. And skill building that we work on just the other night in the Roc Plus program, we had it's March, so we were focusing on budgeting. So who wants to talk about budgeting, right? We just want to spend money. So it's really creative ways for them to understand and learn these skills, but then also to use them once they leave the program. So we talked about this or that, where we compared like, okay, we like these drinks out in the community. So do we want to go to like Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks? Similar things, but costs a lot different. And then that led into conversations about wants and needs. We have a certain amount of money, we have all these things to do. And the fun aspect of it, and for them to be able to really reflect back and utilize what we just talked about, was creating a reusable bag. Talks about, what goes into this. This should be filled with our needs, in our little change purse, that's where we put our wants, and how can we save and things like that. And one of the leaders, as they were leaving, actually said to me in the elevator ride down, that was such an interesting budgeting programming. And I'm going to think of this because I'm going to reuse this bag. And once I go, I'm going to be able to remember, oh, I can make choices. I can, do all these things. So that's one of the ways that we kind of help with teaching things, but keeping it fun and doing something that they're actually going to be able to utilize once they leave the monthly meetings. Then we have our EmpowHer Camp. This is one of our beginning programs, and it is such a phenomenal program. It's a week-long camping trip in the Adirondacks, and this happens in July. And it's for the girls to build their confidence, independent living, and emergency preparedness. So it's a week-long camping trip, but it's a year-long program. where over that year in the camp, you meet with your mentor, you build your relationship with your mentor. You think of an area of emergency preparedness that you like to focus on, because in a year you'll have a reunion and you won't meet in the Adirondacks. You're going to go to Washington, D.C. to present. All of the girls that go to camp will come back, have the reunion, present their projects, and then get to have a chance to meet with their legislation to present again their projects to bring the impact back home. Mia, that I was talking about earlier, I was one of her mentors when I was doing my internship, and her emergency preparedness project was about local domestic violence shelters and doing an accessibility review. And a local shelter allowed us to have access to their counseling center and their actual shelter where the women would live. And because of that accessibility review and project, they actually moved their counseling center because it was not accessible through transportation to even enter the front door for, people that are visiting there to receive services or their employees. So that is the huge impact, that they physically move to a whole nother building to provide the supports, because they didn't realize that that was a barrier and they couldn't serve the most marginalized group and women that really truly needed them the most. So
And can I ask a question about age groups? So when we talked about the transition into workforce programs, are those for the older women, and is camp a certain age, or
sure.
or can the younger the girls as well as the women go to these?
So the EmpowHer camp is 14 to 17-year-olds. Okay, so there's like that middle ground. So the Roc Plus is really getting girls prepared to, do they want to do the camp? Is that something that they're interested in? There's the opportunity for that. The workforce, we're always heading in that direction, right? Because we want them to know that that's an opportunity for them, and we're going to support them through that. The women that are in the age group of working age, we work with them, to find out what their interests are and how we can connect with supports.
That's fantastic. And the reason why I was asking is because it struck me as even in the beginning, we talk about EmpowHer is for girls and women. How important it is to use those words correctly, right? Girls and women. And often we've seen a lot of whether it's media or films or movies or instances where women with disabilities are treated as if they are girls their entire lives. And of course, that is not the case. And so making this distinction in the opportunities that are available to the girls and women at EmpowHer, I think it's amazing that these very specific age groups are looked at and are spoken about in such a very specific way. And do you believe that that is helping to educate others about the fact that there is transition from girls to women when it comes to people with disabilities? Have you seen any difference in that?
It's such an important need and area, right? Because identity is huge. And often girls and women with disabilities, somebody gives them an identity, right? Or chooses it, or how to be. So saying girls, saying women, saying leaders also is so important, because it gives them a sense of self, a sense of how they want to be identified. And it helps them build their confidence, self-advocacy, right? So empowerment, all these things that are so important, especially for girls and women with disabilities.
Yes, and leaders. I mean, and thinking about if all girls and women were able to identify as leaders from the beginning of their lives, I think it's so dynamic, the language that you're being so intentional about. And it's clear that it's making a difference in the results that you're getting. And so we've talked a little bit about barriers, which of course I think we could probably speak about barriers for hours.
Yes.
Uh, because there's so many. Um, but you have experienced some barriers within not just the community, but in terms of even getting girls and women to participate in the programs. Let's talk a little bit about some of the barriers that you have observed and how it is that you are addressing them.
Yes. So, socialization is a barrier, because women with disabilities, girls with disabilities tend to be just grouped with their disability. You know, everybody comes. There's not this group is for intellectual disabled, or this group for this. Everybody comes. So everybody has a chance to socialize. There's barriers with employment, right? So we want to let women know about accommodations that they could get for their jobs, medical, educational, access to location is a huge barrier, especially when it's wintertime and you live in New York and there's snow. The place, might not, be accessible to get through, but then they didn't remove the snow, so that we have that barrier. But the biggest barrier that I'm finding is transportation. The girls, their parents or their caregivers can tend to bring them. But when you start getting more into the teen years and then into 21 plus, there's no public transportation that works well. And then paratransit, it, that is another barrier. Up here in Rochester, there's also an on-demand service that's kind of like an Uber, but it's through our public transportation. That's not really reliable for people with disabilities because it's being utilized for other means. But the paratransit is a huge barrier for women because some of these women live outside of maybe the service area. So how do we there's programming, but now how do we get them there? And that's one area that we've been trying to problem solve, to get more access, for them to have more reliable transportation.
And so some of the things that we're talking about, what are some of the things that you've been able to do to address them? I mean, it's tough because transportation is not a small issue,
Yeah.
and paratransit is not working. And again, the on-demand system, as you said, is also it's a resource that's being used in other areas. So, what are some ways that you've been able to address, not only those barriers, but the inclusive programming that you're doing to address some of the social barriers? Because your organization is really making waves in every area. So talk about some of the ways that you've been able to address these things.
So the transportation that again goes to your network, like your social network, you're building and making these friendships. So we're teaching them real life, what friends do. You call and you plan and you carpool. Hey, you're going in, we live on the same side of town. Can I get a ride? And all these things. So that's been helpful, to get women to come. And also, inviting friends that have access to transportation. So teaching them the self-advocacy and then building the friendship, it's naturally falling in place where the circle of support they're reaching out to, and we're just kind of being that connector with it. Um, the socialization, it's just how can we, participate and include everybody that comes, everybody that for everybody's communication style, for everybody's comfortability, for all of this. And it's really getting to know each other and building the trust. And every meeting we start with the agendas written out. So we know what's going on, we know what's going to happen, and that really removes the barriers of the socialization because maybe if today you don't want to communicate openly as much, but you want to participate, you can follow along and participate and still be included and still work with everybody, but not necessarily be, as we like to call, kind of in the spotlight and holding the microphone. You're giving more space to others. So it's thinking, how can we have programming that can get everybody working together and communicating together and wanting to be involved and learn how to build relationships and maintain them.
Hey, Mandy, let me ask you also, so, as we talk about inclusive programming and really including everyone and allowing people to feel comfortable, what has been your experience, if any, around in being inclusive of people who identify as female or non-binary? Is there space for this in your programming? And if so, how did you incorporate that?
So it actually is. So anybody that identifies as female or woman or feminine and feels as though our mission and our goals are things that they want to explore and they have goals, the space is open to them. And when they're included, we ask, do you feel comfortable? Is it okay, the language that they're using? That we're using, is it empowering for you? And it's always getting the feedback, right? Because how can we know something's not going well or you don't like it unless we provide the opportunity for you to provide the feedback? We talk about those things, and so we can understand, because not everybody may have experienced that or understand what that means. So we provide the dialogue and the open communication for that. And a lot of that happens in the Roc Plus program during the dish and dish portion, where it's, we're eating and we're just kind of naturally conversating. And these are kind of the topics that come up during those dish and dish sessions.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for letting us know about that. And so let's talk really about how can someone enroll?
Yeah.
If someone is, our audience is listening and they want to participate, how can they do that?
Okay, so you can connect with us on our website at disabilityempowhernetwork.org. It'll give you a rundown of all of our programs. We have so many more programs that weren't mentioned here that you have the opportunity to learn more about. You can also email us directly at EmpowHer Roc at disabilityempowhernetwork.org. Myself, Tanika, Sophie, any one of us could send a welcome email back and we'll give you a welcome message, the most updated in-person program here and locally, or if you want information for some of our other programs, we provide all that to you within a welcome letter email.
And we'll put those links in the notes of the podcast, and it may be the same information, but how else can the public get involved? If there are people who maybe want to volunteer or participate in some way, how can they support the Disability EmpowHer Network's mission?
We love volunteers because it provides an opportunity for them to experience what we're doing, and they, leave empowered and wanting to do more. So again, you can visit our website and it gives options for how you could participate. You can volunteer to be a mentor, to come and just kind of support during our programming or get more involved. You can also partner with us and help support programming, camp, whatever you want to do with that. But we always welcome collaboration, volunteers, because without that support, we can't make the impact that we do. And we want to continue to grow the impact and love people to join us.
Again, we will put those links in the notes of the podcast. And as we're getting ready to sign off, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience? Any future developments or upcoming projects to talk about?
Yeah, so we're really excited because our Roc program in April 5th through the 6th, so we're having an overnight lock-in. So that means So much fun all night long, no parents, hanging out. Um, so many opportunities. I hear there's a pajama contest going on. So the buzz is everybody's trying to get the best pajamas. We're going to be looking into having our Roc Plus program have another leadership retreat later on this year. So check our website later this as the year goes on for more details. It'll probably happen in the winter again. And maybe even the Roc Plus group going camping to experience that. We tried that last year. Mother Nature was quite empowered, and we had to change gears, and the women are really looking forward to the possibility of experience with the young leaders experience in their camp program and kind of a shortened version for them. So those are some things that we're looking forward to. And also the Roc Plus program will be doing a community event, a night at the theater to dress your best and go out to the theater and experience that as a group, which is going to be amazing. And that's coming up next month as also.
That's great. I cannot wait to hear about the pajama contest. We'll have to connect after that April event. Mandy, I think we could probably talk all day. There's so many things to talk about, and I cannot wait to have you back to talk about more of the things that you're doing. We absolutely love this program, and we're so happy to have spoken with you today.
Thank you so much. It's been such a wonderful experience. I can't wait to be back, and I'll leave you with when disabled girls lead, we all succeed. So check us out, click the links, and we'll reach back out to you.
Thanks again, Mandy.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye.
Empire State of Rights has been brought to you by Disability Rights New York, your source for disability rights and advocacy. If you enjoyed our program, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this post. The video for this episode is available on our YouTube channel with closed captioning and ASL interpretation. If there is a subject you would like us to discuss, please email podcast@drny.org or comment below. For more Empire State of Rights, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.